Well, many of you will remember Kelsey from her time as a reporter at the Wichita Eagle. Her current project is founding The Beacon, a nonprofit online news organization focused on providing in-depth reporting on how communities are impacted by government. And this is what you have up there on your website. But before you get too deep into telling me about The Beacon and what it is, I'm kind of interested, so you're a journalist, you're a reporter at one point, and now you're a news entrepreneur and a journalist. How did that happen? What are the twists and turns that took you in this direction?
Yes. So, there's a lot of fellow journalists here and former journalists, so hello. I'm glad we're among friends. And I know lots of you from working with you, so I'm glad you're here. I started at the Joplin Globe, and the day after an F5 tornado hit the city, which was kind of a baptism by fire there, and I got to see, firsthand. This is 2011, and so we did do Twitter and Facebook and everything, but the print paper was still really integral in how we communicated with the community, especially when people don't have internet access because their homes have been destroyed. That print paper was their lifeline and their access to know what was going on post-tornado. So that was kind of an interesting time because we were getting into social media and stuff, and we're well into it, but it wasn't completely driven by page views and clicks and things like that. And that was owned by CNHI, which was a smaller company. And then I came to the Wichita Eagle and worked as a healthcare reporter and then a city hall reporter, and then got into data and projects. Really I think kind of learned how to be a real reporter at the Eagle, and got to do some amazing work with people. But and then I came to the Star and did some great projects there. But the story with my career is kind of the story of disruption in this industry. My whole career has been during this disruption. And that's different than some people who maybe spent 30 years in print and then had the rug kind of pulled out from underneath them. And so at the Star, I was laid off in August of 2018, and that's kind of the twist and turn of my career there. And in March of 2018, actually before we were named Pulitzer finalists, a colleague of mine at the Star said, I'm just sitting here waiting to get laid off. And I told him, I was like, that's not good enough. We can't just sit here and wait to be laid off. And that's when I kind of started doing a little bit of research on what's going on in other parts of the country. And of course, we'd all heard of ProPublica and some of the national nonprofits, but I really wanted to look at what's going on in regional journalism and mid-sized city markets. And so I kind of started doing a little bit of research at that time. And then when I was laid off in August, I cried a lot that morning, kind of from the shock. But basically by the afternoon, I said, screw this, and basically was like, we're gonna make this happen. So that's kind of the twist and turn for me anyway.
So what is The Beacon?
So The Beacon will be, it's not officially launched yet, 2020 is the goal. The Beacon will be a regional, in-depth nonprofit news organization. So think of it like a regional mini ProPublica in terms of the content. So there will be beat reporting, there will be staff, and it will be based in Kansas City, but I want to have reporters throughout both states of Kansas and Missouri because Missouri, is similar to Kansas and is facing a lot of the same issues that we've talked about today. And these nonprofits are popping up all over the country, and public radio aside, they're just not in this region at all. And I can't quite figure out why we're kind of this black hole for this kind of innovative work, because it's working in other areas, and other areas are successful and have given us proof of concept that this can work. It's the only area, digital nonprofit media is the only area we're seeing any growth in our industry. And so we need to be looking at how we can do that. And I had a lot of opportunities to leave the Midwest after I was laid off. I had several job offers, and I said, no, we can't just leave or go to another thing. That might be the easy route. I care about this region, and we need journalism here.
So you went to school to learn how to be a journalist. You started at a daily newspaper, and I'm sure you've learned a lot and had a lot of training over time. How well did everything that you learned before this point prepare you for what you're doing now?
That's a good question. Basically, when you're a journalist, you kind of have to become a quick little expert on topics and areas. And so I think you and I had talked before, and you said that journalists they're kind of amazing because we're like these metamorphosis creatures. We can
pretend
learn
to be experts on anything.
And we can learn about something and kind of absorb it and regurgitate it very quickly usually. And so that's kind of what I've had to do as a career, and then also from the research side of trying to say, okay, how do we create a business model? How do we create financial projections? There's a lot of data out there from other people who've done this already. So how do I take it? And I kind of put my reporter's hat on and said, this is like my story. This is my assignment. I'm going to find out how these work, and I'm going to try to create something similar to that can work in this market.
So what's your biggest challenge so far?
Oh boy. So the biggest challenge has been kind of adjusting to that new role. I still freelance as a journalist. I do have a day job to pay the bills, of course, that is journalism adjacent. And the biggest challenge, I think, has been kind of shifting the mindset for me internally to say, okay, I'm not just going to be reporting an individual story, but I'm going to try to create and be an architect of an actual business and make it work. So that's a huge challenge. And then, of course, like any venture, even if it is nonprofit, you need to have a good business plan. And so coming up with money is going to be the big question mark. But we've got some ideas for that.
So you mentioned that this model, this nonprofit model, has been successful in other areas, but we haven't really seen it here in Kansas. What do people say when you tell them about this idea? Are they excited? Are they sending you resumes? Or what's the reaction?
I have had people ask when I'm hiring, and I have to tell them, hold your horses. We're still fundraising, and we'll be announcing things. I'm trying to get people to sign up for the newsletter to build an email list, because that's going to be an important part of the distribution model. But also, some folks have been really supportive, and I found that there are different attitudes, and I don't know how to say this nicely, but there have been different attitudes that I've run into depending on who I'm talking to and what their background is, of course. So some people are used to the idea that a nonprofit can still be successful, can still be run well, can still make money, essentially, and can be sustainable. Some folks that I've talked to have a hard time grasping the idea that even exists, because the first question out of their mouth is, well, why don't you just do for-profit? And I kind of have to backtrack them and give them some more explanation into why we've chosen this particular model, especially with the grant opportunities that are available in nonprofit journalism. I mean, I don't want to just cut off a leg from the beginning by choosing a for-profit model, plus there's several other reasons too, but that's kind of a biggie, especially in journalism. There's a lot of grants that are available for the reporting side, and it would be silly to just say, nope, we're not going to be eligible for any of that.
I imagine that if we're going to have news coverage in Kansas, over the coming decades, we're probably going to need more people like you to sort of step up and create their own things in the communities to be news entrepreneurs. So I'm curious, based on your experience so far, do you have any advice for the future Kelseys of the world, or for communities that are looking for a Kelsey to fill gaps that they see emerging?
I have I've reached out to a lot of the folks who are running these nonprofits that have been established, and some of the newer ones too. And what I have found is that in this sphere, people are more than willing to help you. And for instance, one of the nonprofits that I've been talking with, they're giving me all of their membership benchmarks. So I can create my own projections on where we should be within 3 months after launch, 6 months after launch. And they're a similar market size. They're slightly larger, but they're non-coastal, so that's important too. So I guess the bottom line is, don't be afraid to ask questions, which if you're a reporter, you shouldn't be afraid to do this inherently. And then, do your research. I mean, you know how to find 990s and look at their budgets and figure out what their line items are and figure out how to put the pieces together, and then call them up and talk to them. And what are your biggest challenges? How did you do this? How did you incorporate? I have found that if you ask for help, oftentimes people will give you help. So you just have to kind of, if you have pride, you have to swallow it and just kind of come at it just like you are a reporter. Sometimes I would play the dumb blonde reporter, like, hey, can you tell me a little bit? I don't understand this. But people are sympathetic, and they will give you as much information as they can if you explain to them what your motives are. And the folks who are starting these have all been in that same position, so that's important.
That feels like a different attitude, though, than what I've often seen. Like, when we talk about media, it's often a sense of competition, that we got to beat the other guy, or we got to be better than the other guy. But that sounds like a more collaborative and supportive relationship.
Yeah, and so for instance, I've already had conversations with public radio stations in the region and saying, hey, once we get this off the ground, I want us to work together. Because, there's no sense, especially when our numbers are so low, in alienating other media. We need to be working to find, audiences and to make relationships and build relationships with people. And one way is, of course, through events and content-driven events, not advertising-driven events. But there's a lot of collaboration in the nonprofit sphere that is encouraging to me, and I think that's kind of the direction that we need to head.
So thank you so much for joining us. So real quick, you've talked about the Beacon, someone's interested in finding out more, doing something to get involved, help, what can they do?
They can go to our website. Here's my shameless plug. They can go to our website. They can read about it. We've made a lot of progress in just a few months. We are officially incorporated as of 3 weeks ago. We have a law firm that is doing things pro bono. We're filing 501c3. Emily Bradbury's here somewhere. And there you are. Hi. The Kansas Press Association is going to be the newspaper foundation. That's part of that is our fiscal agent. That's kind of a transition to a 501c3. And so we've made a lot of progress, but it's just the beginning of the fundraising for the first year. And basically, if you want to support us, go online, sign up for the newsletter where we'll be giving people updates on progress. Contact me, tell me, if you know someone we need to talk to, or have ideas for funders, of course, is very important. But most importantly, if you care about this issue, of course, subscribe and pay for local news, and donate to public radio, subscribe to your local newspaper, because it is important, and ultimately people just have to put their money where their mouth is if this is going to work for our society. So.
Well, I'll be eagerly watching and rooting for you as you go about this process. Let's thank Kelsey for her time. Oh,
yeah.
I thought you did. I thought we said the Beacon. Oh,
yeah, it's kind of funky. It's www.thebeacon.media. So it's .media instead of .com. So there it is.
Okay. Well, now comes the point in the evening where we're going to turn it back over to you to have some discussions, and welcome Ed back to the stage. This isn't really a stage, but it's all right.
Well, thank you. And how about for Joel and Kelsey, another big round of applause for the work you've done tonight.